has such a narrow mind in view of Scripture and everything else. And it's hard, though. I think the pain comes when you realize, man, for some of you, you know what I'm talking about, where you have family members that just think you're an absolute fool for believing what you believe. To absolutely believe in the Bible and to think that Jesus is the Son of God and that He's the only way to heaven. And it's just hard. It's hard because, not just because, it ruins your relationship with them, but it's more your concern of, here's the people I love so much, and they're not experiencing what I'm experiencing with God, and it drives you crazy. And it's one of those things that you try to just kick out of your mind because it's too painful to think about. And yesterday I had just gotten back from some time with my family, and it was just such a struggle, to where it's all I could think about. And I tried to get up and preach, and by the time I was done, I just knew I was kind of just not all there. So at the end of the service, I just said to everyone, I said, hey, was that kind of weird tonight? And everyone's like, yeah, and because it's heartbreaking. And you don't just get over it and move on when the people you love the most don't know Christ, don't really know Christ, and you're so sure of what you believe, and so sure that you found it, and it's just tough. It's rough, and I know some of you guys this time of year is difficult for you, going through some of that stuff. There's part of me that's tempted to put off the lesson another week and talk about family, but we got to get to this procrastination message, and The one thing I will say, during this time, if I could sum it all up, is, as the holidays just keep coming, and Christmas is going to be coming around and this and that, just continue to love. Don't go into it with expectations. That's where we get into trouble. We think that we deserve a certain type of treatment or this or that, and the truth is that's not how Jesus lived. He just kept loving. He never got what he deserved here on the earth. He just kept loving, giving. And just pray that God would just enable you to speak up when you're supposed to speak up and to be quiet when you're supposed to be quiet. That's hard. It's hard having that judgment, those times when you think, man, every time I speak up about God, it seems like there's a fight. But then if I'm quiet and, and just kind of play the game, then, we're at peace. But then am I being a coward? And, you just don't know. You just keep loving, and you just keep doing it, and you just keep praying and say, God, give me some wisdom. Give me some wisdom this holiday season. And just pray that we could be lights, wherever we are. So, anyways, let me tell you why I put off this message on procrastination. We were, when I came back from Africa, and we, saw the need there, there are only a few times in life when you run into things that are really critical, okay, that are just necessary. When you see something that is so important, you just go, I've got to do something about this now. You see, there are a lot of things in life that are loud and will scream out for your attention, but those are not necessarily the things that are critical. So every once in a while, though, you see something in life where you just go, this is critical, this has to be done. And you can't put those things off, because if you put them off, you forget about them. And so when I saw the need over there, I was like, no, something needs to be done. We can't just go on with life as usual while this is going on. We have to do something. And we have to act, and we have to love, and we need to care for these people who are suffering right now. It's critical. It's necessary. It's important. You see, because when we put things off, they don't happen. So whenever in life you run into something that you know is important, is critical, just do it. Because we all procrastinate. How many of you, I'll see you and I'll say, hey, or you'll say to me, hey, let's get together sometime. I'm like, okay. It's not going to happen. Okay, we just both say it, and we may have the greatest intentions of, we really want to hook up, but it's not going to happen because we're both going to get busy. Other things will scream for a time unless we stop and say, no, right now, let's make a plan. When are we going to meet? When are we going to get together? Where are we going to meet? Nothing's going to get in the way. That's the only time that it actually happens. We have to be people who make plans because we all procrastinate. I want you to think right now, what is one thing in your mind right now that you are putting off? Just think in your mind right now. You got something? That didn't take long. It's on top of our head. We can think of something we're putting off right now. Now, with that thing, whatever it is in your life that you are putting off, I want you to think this through. what would be the consequences? What are the consequences of you putting off whatever it is for too long? Okay? If you put this thing, whatever you're thinking about, if you put it off too long, what are the consequences? As you think that through, some of you are going, well, my thing that I'm putting off, it really isn't going to matter that much. There'll be some consequences, but nothing major. Others of you, you're thinking, wow, if I put this off until it's too late, there's some major consequences. See, and those are the ones that matter. You see, there are things in life that you're going to put off, and it's really not that big a deal because it's not that important. The consequences aren't so great. But there are other things in life that are critical, things that we can't afford to put off, and yet those are usually the things that we do put off because they're not necessarily the loudest. They're not necessarily the easiest. And so we put them off, and that's what Jesus is talking about here in this passage in Luke 12. He explains to these people, he goes, look, you put so much time and effort into things that really don't matter. And then when it comes to the things that really do matter, you put them off. You don't deal with them. It's not so much about procrastinating as it is about prioritizing. And saying, wow, this is the most important thing, so this is what I need to do immediately. And he speaks to them in Luke chapter 12, verse 54, about how they neglect the things that are critical, and yet they take time for the things that are insignificant. It's like if you've got cancer, and you go, I'm going to skip my chemo treatment because I want to go get a facelift. That's what we do in life. We neglect the things that are really internal and that really matter, and we do these little surfacey things that really aren't the issue. And so Jesus addresses this crowd in Luke 12, verse 54, and he says to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, it's going to rain, and it does. And when the south wind blows, you say, it's going to be hot, and it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? Okay. Jesus is talking to these people, and it's like, I don't know if any of you grew up on a farm, but usually when I talk to people who say, yeah, I grew up on a farm, I remember Pops would go out, and he'd go, it's going to rain, and it's like, how do you know that? And he goes, around 3:30, and it's like, wow, he's got it down, he's got it figured out, and he was always right, and you never could figure it out, but somehow he had his system, and he knew when it was going to rain. That's the picture here. He's telling this crowd, he goes, some of you are brilliant. You can look out, and you've studied this so much that when you see a little cloud there in the west, because Palestine has a western seaboard, a lot like us, and if you see a cloud in the right formation, you could say, it's going to rain. You can figure out when it's going to rain. Also, he says, you guys also have figured out that the breeze, if it's coming from the south, kind of like what we do with the Santa Anas, but over there, they've got the desert to the south of them, and all of Africa goes, you got this warm wind, you know what the temperature is going to be, that it's going to be hot. You've got it all figured out. You know the details about the weather. You see signs, and you know what's coming. He goes, if you figured all that out, how in the world did you miss what has just happened? How in the world can you miss the fact that the Son of God, the Messiah, is standing in front of you? He says you can figure out signs and figure out these other things, but if you would really study the Old Testament, if you really studied the prophecies of the Old Testament, you would see that this Messiah was going to come and you'd be ready for him. If you really looked, you would see that even in the book of Daniel, it explains the exact time in which he would come. You would have been ready. But even bigger than that, he's saying, man, if you would just open your eyes and look at what I'm doing, you would recognize, wait, something big's happening right now in front of my face. Because did it ever occur to you when you saw that guy who was blind since birth and I laid my hands on him and suddenly he could see that there was something unique about me? Or maybe the paralyzed guy who'd been paralyzed his whole life and I said, get up and walk. Did that give you a clue that maybe there's something supernatural going on? How can you not see these things in front of your face? And later he was to raise Lazarus from the dead. A man who'd been dead and in the tomb for 3 days, he was going to raise it. And you know what? They wouldn't figure it out. Jesus says, you're hypocrites. He goes, you really don't want to figure it out. You care more about the weather than you care about spiritual things and eternal things. And, it's just, it's true of a lot of us. We know a lot about things that don't matter. But how much do we know about the things that really do matter? I think when Christ returns, at the return of Christ, it's going to be very much the same way. People will have so little knowledge of what the return of Christ was supposed to be like. I mean, do you know the signs that Jesus talks about that would accompany his return, what it was going to be like? Have you ever studied that? Ever studied the book of Revelation? I mean, even the book of Revelation gives us hints as to what the world is going to look like when Christ returns. And it gives us an idea so that we can be anticipating and waiting. And I know for some of you, the hard part is that you've heard this all your life. Some of you grew up in church and you would hear about signs about, oh, you know what, all this has been fulfilled. And you think, oh no, Christ could come this week. And so you get all ready, you get your life in order, then he doesn't come. You know, a few years later, someone else gives another talk, you get all fired, he still doesn't come. You know, and then you see some current events, more things happen, he still isn't here. And you can start to get discouraged rather than getting more anticipatory. Is that a word? Sure. You know what? Whatever. You know what I'm saying. You know, rather than getting more excited and more anxious about his coming, it kind of grows old because you think, wait a second. And I've heard this argument before. You know, but every generation since Christ left has thought that he was going to return. And I said, you're right. You're right. And I believe that God has constructed it in such a way. If you look at Scripture, it's like this. Suppose imagine this is a table up here, okay? Let's say it's a dinner table. And okay, it's about time to eat. And you know dinner's going to be coming at some point. And someone comes out and they put a tablecloth on it. And you think, all right, cool, dinner's coming. The food's going to be coming any minute. But then someone else comes out and they put, silverware on the table, napkins and forks and knives. And you go, okay, now the table is set. Dinner is going to come at any moment. This is so cool, But then someone else comes out and he puts glasses on the table. And says, oh, yeah, I forgot about the glasses. Okay, now the glasses are in place, so now I know dinner's going to come anytime. And you get all excited. And then someone else comes out and they put flowers on the table. And you think, oh, yeah, I forgot about flowers. Okay, now it's really, really set. The flowers are there, they're going to die, dinner's got to be coming. But then, then someone, dims the lights and they, turn on the music. And you think, oh, music. Okay, I forgot all about this. Okay, yeah. There's more that comes to this dinner. And then someone else comes out and they bring candles and they light them. And you go, okay, the candles are lit, the wax is dripping, dinner has got to be coming soon. See, that's what's going on with prophecy. It's not that it wasn't ready. It's just like, you look at it and you go, man, how much more ready can the world get for the return of Christ? I mean, from everything I understand of Scripture, it's like the table is set more than ever. I mean, I know a lot of you, well, not a lot of you, some of you, maybe a couple of you, back in 1948, okay? 1948, that was an amazing year because that was the year that Israel became a nation again. And that was something that was impossible. I mean, from all human standards, we look at it and just go, how in the world did Israel become a nation again? They hadn't been a nation in hundreds of years. They were obliterated, scattered all over the world, and then suddenly something happened that had never happened in the history of man. This nation comes together and gets their own land back. You just think, no way. And when you look at the book of Revelation, you think, wait, and it seems like when the Messiah returns, it sure seems like he's going to Israel, and yet Israel didn't really exist as a nation. And so in 1948, people said, okay, it's set. Then in 1967, there was the Six-Day War. The Six-Day War, which was another supernatural event, because that should not have happened. That should not have worked. Israel should have been obliterated.